It all started on what should have been a normal trip to the pharmacy. I was there to pick up a prescription, life-saving medication that I absolutely can't go without. But before I could even walk through the door, she showed up. You know the type. Clipboard in hand, arms crossed, eyes full of judgment. Yep, it was the HOA Karen. I've dealt with her before, but this time, she took things way too far. She stormed up, yelling about some ridiculous HOA violation, something about how I parked my car for too long or didn't have the right sticker. I tried to explain, calmly, that I just needed to grab my meds, but she wasn't hearing any of it. What happened next blew my mind. She actually tried to block the entrance, ranting about how rules are rules. Meanwhile, I was literally shaking because I needed those meds. Time wasn't on my side, and she didn't care. People started gathering, and the tension kept rising. The pharmacist saw what was going on from inside and ended up doing something no one expected. That's when the police showed up, and what they found shocked even them. Turns out, Karen wasn't just a busybody with too much time on her hands. There was a lot more to her story. And what happened after that, you're not gonna believe it. So here's the thing, this wasn't my first run-in with her. Ever since she got voted onto the HOA board, she's made it her mission to micromanage everything and everyone in the neighborhood. I'd heard the stories, sure. Late-night complaints, towing cars without warning, even putting violation notices on people's doors for having the wrong shade of curtains. But I never thought she'd go this far, especially not when someone's health was on the line. The craziest part, I've never even had issues with my parking before. I was in a clearly marked visitor spot, engine still running, just trying to grab my prescription and go. But to her, that didn't matter. She kept saying things like, "This is my community, and people like you ruin the neighborhood." It honestly felt personal, like she had some weird grudge I didn't know about. Meanwhile, I'm starting to feel worse. My medication isn't just for comfort, it literally keeps my condition under control. I tried to walk past her, but she physically stepped in front of me. That's when people around us started recording. She didn't care. She doubled down, accusing me of trespassing, even though I live there. The pharmacist finally came out and told her to back off, and when she didn't, that's when everything spiraled. The police were already on their way. By the time the police arrived, a small crowd had formed outside the pharmacy. Some folks were clearly neighbors, whispering to each other and shaking their heads. A couple people were filming, and honestly, I was glad they were, because I could already feel this situation getting twisted. Karen stood there like she owned the place, arms folded, telling the officers that I was being aggressive and causing a disturbance. Meanwhile, I was just trying not to collapse from stress, still without my medication. One of the officers pulled me aside, asking calmly what was going on. I explained everything, how I lived just down the street, how I urgently needed my prescription, how this woman had blocked me for no reason. I showed him the text from the pharmacy saying my meds were ready. He nodded, but I could see he was still trying to piece it all together. Karen, on the other hand, kept interrupting, throwing around HOA rules and acting like she had some kind of legal authority. That's when another layer of the story came out. One of the bystanders stepped forward, a young woman I didn't recognize, and said, "She did the same thing to my grandma last month." Apparently, Karen had harassed several people at the same shopping center before. This wasn't about parking or rules. It was about control. And things were only getting more intense. The officer's expression shifted as the woman spoke up. Karen's face turned beet red, and I could tell she was trying to keep her composure. But the pressure was building. It wasn't just one person now. Several people had come forward, each with their own horror stories of how Karen had made their lives miserable. One after another, they spoke about how she'd made their simple tasks into mountains to climb, inspecting trash bins, accusing people of noise complaints they never even knew about, and bullying elderly residents into compliance with impossible demands. I could feel the tension in the air, thick with anticipation. The officer seemed to be taking it all in, but Karen was doubling down, telling him that the complaints were lies, that these people had a vendetta against her. She even went so far as to claim that I was the one causing the trouble, that I was being unreasonable. Her voice was growing louder, and at that moment, I felt a cold chill run down my spine. It was clear that she wasn't going to back down, and I was starting to feel like she was going to drag me into some kind of legal nightmare. But just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Karen made a bold move. She turned to the officer, pulled something from her bag, and handed it to him. It was a stack of papers, the very HOA rules she'd been quoting earlier, but this time, it was clear she was trying to escalate the situation. The officer took the papers, glanced through them quickly, and then looked up at Karen, his expression unreadable. The crowd fell silent. Was this going to be the moment everything flipped? My heart was racing as I braced for what would come next. The officer's eyes flicked back and forth between the papers and Karen, his brow furrowed. For a second, I thought maybe she had him. Maybe she was going to pull some legal loophole out of nowhere and have me thrown into some kind of HOA trap. But then, as he glanced at me, something strange happened. The officer's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and read a message. His face tightened, and I could see the shift in his demeanor. Without warning, he looked up at Karen and said, "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside for a moment." My stomach sank. What did that mean? Was she about to hit a free pass? But then something even more shocking happened. The officer turned to me and asked, "Did you say you lived at street name?" I nodded, confused. "You're listed as the primary resident there, right?" Again, I nodded, still unsure where this was headed. And then it hit me. This wasn't just about some HOA drama. There was something bigger going on. The officer pulled out his radio, speaking quickly into it. The tension in the air was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. I barely heard what he was saying, but the words fraud investigation floated in the air. Karen's face went pale. She tried to hide it, but I could see the sweat starting to bead on her forehead. What was she involved in? The stakes were suddenly much higher than I'd ever imagined. And before I could even process what was going on, the officer turned to me, his eyes serious. "We're going to need you to come with us." My heart skipped a beat. What had Karen done? And what did this mean for me? The officer motioned for me to follow him, and my heart raced as I walked towards his car. The whole scene had taken on a surreal, almost dreamlike quality. I couldn't stop thinking about the words fraud investigation echoing in my mind. What was Karen hiding? What had she done to drag me into this mess? We reached the car, and the officer handed me a pair of handcuffs. My breath caught in my throat. I was about to be arrested, wasn't I? But just as he was about to cuff me, another officer walked up, holding a folder with what looked like documents. More of Karen's papers, I thought. The officer glanced at me, then at Karen, and gave me a subtle nod. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. Whatever was coming next, it was going to change everything. Then, in an instant, the officer tossed the folder to Karen. "You're under arrest for identity theft and forgery," he said, his voice flat, but carrying the weight of the moment. The crowd around us gasped. I could barely process it, but the officers were pulling out all the evidence. Karen had been using her position on the HOA board to steal personal information from residents, including me, and had been forging documents to make it seem like they'd violated HOA rules.